The biggest parenting trends when I had babies 16 and a half years ago were Baby Wise and To Train Up a Child. Baby Wise were by the Ezzos, Ezzo, and To Train Up a Child were by the Pearls, Michael and Debbie Pearl. I think that book, though, is just Michael Pearl. And it wasn't like super hardcore in my circles, but it was pretty prominent, especially Baby Wise. I would love to know what the dominant kind of trends are right now in new mama land. If you new young moms would share. I find it fascinating to see the things that come and go and the ways that they affect us, impact us, and then what we think about them in hindsight. So I will just say my biggest encouragement is to use your critical thinking as you approach these trends or these fads or these dominant approaches that we hear about. It doesn't mean that I'm critical of all of them or that they're all bad or that every part of them is bad. But it's definitely a big deal to not get sucked into something and make it the way you do things and the right way, because I find that in most cases you will have deep regret if you hold anything to that standard of just the right way. So in my personal experience, I will say the Baby Wise thing, and I did the Christian version, which I cannot remember what it was called because we always referred to it as Baby Wise. But it's the same authors. They just had the Christian spin on the Christian version, and then they with Bible verses and maybe just more freedom to talk about the Lord. And then in the secular version, it was just called Baby Wise, and so that was for the general population. But it was all about schedule feeding your children, and the concept made sense. It was feed your babies on a schedule. You want to get them on a routine and a schedule to where you can predict their eating patterns, or create really their eating patterns, their hunger patterns. When you feed them, make sure that you can keep them alert long enough so that they actually have the entire feeding, because if they fall asleep halfway through the feeding, then they're not going to be full enough, and then they're not going to sleep enough. So your goal is to keep them up long enough, and so that they have their full meal, and then keep them awake a little while, and then put them down for their nap. There was this cycle. It was feeding, playtime, nap time, feeding, playtime, nap time, to the point where you would wake them up to feed them, because the clock told you to. I don't think there's anything wrong with just that basic kind of rhythm and predictable pattern for the baby, for yourself, all of that. That's where it's harmless, right? It becomes harmful when you start to get sucked into it as a stressful law kind of thing, and the clock dictates your life, and you can't break the schedule. They tell you things like, don't rock your baby to sleep. You want to keep them awake and then put them in the bed so that they fall asleep by themselves, and then you go and wake them up when it's time to eat again, and you keep them on, the time frames get bigger as they get older. You start off with like an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then as a few months in, it becomes every 2.5 hours. A few months in, it becomes every 3 to 3.5 hours, and then the final stage is every 4 hours, and that's when you start to cut off feedings. The middle of the night one, or like the late morning one, usually goes first, and then eventually the middle of the night one, and then the last feeding of the night gets a little earlier, and whatever. There's this whole thing. I don't need to go into too much detail like I am doing already. My point is, sounds great, sounds logical, sounds good, but I fear that very few people can actually do this and not let it consume them, stress them out, dictate their life, and almost like lose some things, because I remember, thankfully I saw through some of it and did not follow it. For example, I nursed my babies to sleep every single time, and I loved it. That would be a no-no in the Baby Wise rule handbook, but I did it anyways because I thought, I have less than a year that my baby is this size and this cuteness, and I want to enjoy it. I don't want to be so focused on this schedule that I miss these beautiful, precious, tender moments and times with them. So I kind of ignored that piece. I also always went to them when they cried, held them, comforted them. I didn't really do the whole self-soothe thing, because I just figured God gave babies the ability to cry out for their mamas, and that's my job, to come and comfort them. So I didn't go into that part either. I remember being a little stressed about the clock, really stressed about other people holding them when they were supposed to be falling asleep. And I thought, this is stupid. What am I doing to myself? So that may have been a me problem, not necessarily the program's problem. And then I will say, for anyone who wants to nurse for at least a year, around 6 or 7 months with both babies, my milk supply started to drop. And I think it had everything to do with me dropping those nighttime feedings. So I had to supplement with rice milk, and it was not really helping them sleep. So I was back up around 7 or 8 months with both children. And I just think it was because I was weaning them too early, or I was spreading their feedings apart too far. And so I don't necessarily have regrets, but I can see, maybe this is why this happened. Then I started to hear all my friends around 6 or 7 months starting to drop in their milk supply as well. And I was like, there's got to be a connection here. So if you had a great experience doing it, awesome. I'm so happy for you. Like I said, I'm not saying this thing is bad, don't do it. I'm just saying this was my experience. Take it for what it's worth. Even if BabyWise is banned forever and no one agrees with it anymore, I feel like all these trends, they come and go. It's just part of the way humans are. Don't take them and run with them as if they are the only way, whatever it may be. Even if it's the opposite of BabyWise, the whole sleeping with the baby thing, what was that called? Attachment parenting, maybe, is like the pushback, go the other extreme. I think any extreme is probably not good. You want to be somewhere in the middle, right? And then the other thing that was not huge in my circles, but a few people that I really respected and loved and admired grew up with the whole Michael Pearl to train up a child thing. So I did visit that, and I did not go down that road. I did not like the training sessions. To me, it seemed and felt like you were setting your child up for failure in order to practice disciplining. I did not like the concept of breaking your child's will. I like the concept of shaping your child's will. I want to shape you through wisdom and discernment through the scriptures to give you the perspective that God wants you to have of who you are, why you were made, and how God wants to use you. And I think that with our will, then we desire good things because we are hearing good things about what God wants for us. So I really wanted to train my children to want to be good, not break their will in order to force them to be good or to behave the way I want them to behave. I think it's totally normal to want to be good and then to fall short because we're in this flesh. But with the inner man, we desire good things. And if we are honest with ourselves, we're not much different than our children in that way. We mess up in the flesh, but in our inner man, we want to do the right thing. But man, we reacted the wrong way. The flesh fails us very often. So I think children are not very, very different. Like they desire to please their parents. They desire to be a good boy and a good girl. And we need to speak to them to uplift that beautiful, innocent desire. I always told my kiddos, I know you want to obey mama. I know, and it's okay that you messed up, but you have got to remember it's your choice. When I tell you, yep, do this or don't do that, you need to choose in that moment to obey me. And I would encourage them that I knew they wanted to do the right thing. And then I would also not shame them for doing the wrong thing. And I only reserved spanking for non-negotiables, like blatant defiance, which didn't happen that often because I was on my children's side, encouraging them, lifting them up, building them up, trying to guide them and show them what all the beautiful things God wanted for them. They were not defiant children. I redirected quite often. I made a very early decision that I was not going to rearrange my living room just because I had kids, but I did empty off the middle coffee table. That was completely empty, and that was for them to cruise, to bite, to climb, whatever. But the side tables I left with all the same decorations. And so the way I trained them was when they would go to the coffee table, I'd say, oh no, this over here, or to the side table. I would just say, no, mama wants you at this table. No, that table's not for you, this one. And I would redirect them so constantly, which I know requires a lot of work, intentionality, and consistency. But hey, kids are smart. And it worked. And on the occasion where they like would go touch the table to see if they could defy me, then I swatted their hand, never like a crazy angry person, just no, and then over here. And thankfully, they didn't give me much trouble. They complied and followed the rule. And so we didn't need to have, break your will spanking sessions, which I wouldn't do that. I always said good job to my kids. I always cheered them on. I know a lot of people are against that, which I find interesting, but I think even we need encouragement and acknowledgement when we do something right and good, and then it just inspires us and makes us desire to want to do more, right? It encourages us to keep doing well, to keep up the good work. That's how we are, and little children are similar. And then, of course, when they fail, to not shame them or destroy them, but to lovingly comfort them and show them grace and acceptance and comfort. And just like God does with us, right? God doesn't break our will. God gives us free will. And then he tells us what's good. He tells us what's bad. And then he leaves it up to us. And we're going to follow and trust his loving guidance with what's good, and also allow us to do what's bad. We will bring consequences into our own lives that way through our actions, the results of our actions, but also he disciplines those he loves. And I truly believe that we are to parent similarly. We're not breaking a person's will, just like God doesn't break our will. We're shaping their will, training their will. We're on their side. We're for them, not against them. So those are two major trends that were pretty popular about 16 years ago when I was a new mother. Please share if you've heard of these, what you think of them, your experience with them if you have any, and what are the new trends these days with the new mothers. I would love to know. God bless you guys, and see you next time.